Welcome to the Filmmaker Mixer Podcast, the podcast by filmmakers for filmmakers.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, software for all of your production needs. Stay tuned for more information later in the show. Hello, everybody. This is the Filmmaker Mixer Podcast, and today we are chatting with filmmaker George Ellzey Jr. He's got a new film out called Cottage Grove. He's done a lot of other work, and so we're going to jump in and just have a chat about storytelling and filmmaking. So, George, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, looking forward to it. And you're in Chicago, right?
Yes, I'm a native Chicagoan. Have been here all my life with the exception of like New Zealand in high school. And then I lived in
as
Maine.
Many Chicagoans do. They come from New Zealand.
Yeah. They just go to New Zealand after living on the South Side. But then I went to school in Maine for undergrad. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, you're up in Andrew's territory.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I've worked with Gary before, your cinematographer, recently,
right on.
actually. Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. What was that? What project was that?
Gary AC'd on a project on a short I produced a couple months ago with, I don't know if you know Patrick, but he was DPing that one. So small world.
He told me about it. Gary's a great cinematographer, artist, and now he's a brother and friend. So yeah.
Wow,
I'm happy
small
that he's
world.
getting work. Yeah.
Well, tell us about you. How did you get involved in filmmaking? How did you get the bug?
Yeah, I think it's a long road, but it makes sense. Um, I would say I was always a storyteller. I have two older sisters that are 10 and 7 years older than me. So when I came on the scene, they weren't really trying to play with their younger brother. So I had to occupy my time with like making plays and stories out of my action figures. So that was like the foundation of it, as well as my mother really pushing us into literature and writing. So that was like my genesis story. But then I went to undergrad. I was an English and theater major, so I was in front of the camera first. Came back to Chicago, did some acting, had an agent, did the whole thing. And then around like 2015, I got frustrated with the auditions I was sent on. So instead of complaining, I decided, hey, let me just rally some friends and make some crappy stuff until I felt confident enough to make my own short. So I made a short in 2017 with my co-writer, Kara Winter, and I used that to go to DePaul to focus more on the technical aspects of filmmaking.
So did you go into DePaul wanting to be a writer-director, or was there a different kind of position on maybe behind the camera that you're more interested in? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I think I went in with a clear mind of being a writer director. I loved, with my foundation in acting, I loved to see how actors would transform in front of the screen. And I've had like some really piss poor experiences with directors. And so that's what led me to like, let me direct my own projects and make actors feel comfortable and safe on set so they can do their best work. So I consider myself an actor's director. So going into graduate school, I really wanted to focus on the technical aspects of film as opposed to story, because I felt like I knew what my voice was. And throughout that process, I just developed and strengthened that voice with the new skill set and tools that I acquired.
So, with an experience and a background in acting, and you say you're an actor's director, I'm curious, what do you think you bring to the table as a director, having been an actor? How does that affect your process?
Yeah, I always go back to the script. Like the story's not strong, then it doesn't matter how many bells and whistles you put on it, with lighting or performance, it's still not going to be a strong product, in my opinion. And so I remember getting scripts from directors that weren't, interesting or challenging or allowed me to
In terms
fully
of,
show.
I'm sorry, I'm totally interrupting. I didn't
No,
mean
it's
to.
totally fine.
When you say weren't as challenging, do you mean in terms of the plot, or are you talking about character development, or
I
both?
think both. I've had both. So I've had some scripts when I was an actor that had shallow characters, or had scripts where the characters were so rich, but the story didn't support the characters.
Right.
And so going into graduate school or even into my own project, I always thought about like the actors first, or more importantly, the story first. Like if I'm not moved by the story, if I'm not challenged by the story, how can I expect the rest of the production to do so? So that's what I leaned into for when I first started projects, and I feel like I've just been deepening that process ever since then with Cottage Grove and other projects that I'm working on.
So a question I like to ask, especially when it comes to shorts, is
Mm.
maybe where the antithesis of the project came from. A lot of people I find, say maybe the short came from a feature, a scene from a feature I wanted, or I wanted, always tell like a elongated feature kind of story, and this short was kind of a testing model for it, or if it was just really like just a short that you wanted to do.
Yeah, so I originally had a different story before Cottage Grove for my MFA thesis at DePaul. And it's similar now thinking back on it. It's like very reminiscent of Cottage Grove, but in a totally different sphere. It was a father-son story. But with most of my work, it always comes with a shred of my own personal experience. So Cottage Grove came from similar to the setup of my father, my estranged father, having a stroke. And similar to the film, I picked him up from a hospital. We stopped off at a local drugstore for his girlfriend to get some groceries and medicine for him. And we sat in the car and didn't speak. And that was the first time my father and I spent that amount of time together ever in life.
Hmm.
I'm a child of divorce, and he was not present while I was growing up. So the feeling of being forced to be in the same space with someone who has so much history with you but no relationship was so interesting for me. So I used that experience, some of the awkwardness from that, and use that for fodder for the script. And it's funny that you asked about like, is this going to be people usually use proof of concepts or shorts for a feature? That is not the case for this. I love the fact that this story is in the parking lot and we leave them in the parking lot. Um, and I think that's where the magic lies in the story, in my opinion.
So when you have an idea like Cottage Grove,
Mm.
what's your process to flesh it out into a full script? Because a lot of us, we get that little nugget of an idea and we're thinking, oh, this is kind of interesting. Now what do I do with it? So what was your process to flesh out that story?
Yeah, it was a long process.
It
So
just
it
happened
has,
overnight.
yeah, no, I got it. So the actual event, the personal experience happened in like June 2021. And I would say like the day after, I just did like a word vomit for the first script, of just everything that I wanted to say with my dad. And it was a long, long script. And then after I had my emotional like dump from it, I wanted to focus on structuring it. And one thing that I learned from DePaul is a specific professor named Ali. I'm forgetting his last name, but he's amazing. He would tell us that you don't know your story until the 10th draft.
Hmm.
And I workshopped that script from June until about December, going through several phases of the story, figuring out the structure. And what really made it better and allowed me to find that story was focusing on the characters. And that way, I was able to detach my personal connection from the story and just make these two fictional characters their own. So it was a long process. I think I wrote about 13 drafts of it. But I'm very proud of the final piece because it has a shred of my own identity, but it allows me to explore topics and themes that I see in my friend groups, things that I see in culture. And so, yeah, I'm very proud of it.
What were, if there were any kind of maybe sacrifices you had to make, or maybe happy accidents when it came to what you wrote on page and what turned out to be on screen, whether it be hiccups on the day, maybe an actor, maybe a location, a prop that you thought you had you couldn't get? I'm just curious on that end.
Yeah, you know what? We actually had a very smooth ride with this short. Prior to Cottage Grove, I made another short, and it was really a trial by error. I really, with me in life, I have to learn by making huge mistakes, like really hitting my head on a brick wall. And from that previous short, I allowed myself to cower and not advocate for myself on set with people who I thought was more experienced than I was. And I hated that feeling. I hated the atmosphere I created on set by not championing my own story. So with Cottage Grove, We went into like full, we had a long pre-production process. I interviewed my DPs, I interviewed Gary. We had like several interviews with him, my producers, and then we had like 3 or 4 months of just like talking about the story, going through the beats, and making sure we had a foundation of trust and creativity, so that when we got on set, I wasn't micromanaging. Everyone was walking in their strength. So, but to your question of something that changed, uh, I had like a longer sequence at the beginning that once we were in the edit just didn't it wasn't necessary. Um, so we cut out like at least 2 or 3 minutes off the top, and I think it works well. It keeps the pacing solid.
I'm curious when you do screen the film, because you've had some success with the screenings. You've won some awards and some things like that. I'm
Yeah.
curious, when you do Q&As and you talk about audience or you talk with an audience member about the film, do they ever ask questions that you never thought, what am I trying to say? Do they see things in the film that maybe you didn't intend? Because sometimes that's a happy accident. You make a film and an audience member will, it'll touch them personally in a way that maybe you didn't expect. So did that ever happen?
Yeah, I'm so grateful for how many festivals we screen at and people's engagement with the work. Like the story is very specifically like about African American men on the south side of Chicago showing the beauty and challenges of my neighborhood. And the fact that we screened it like Wichita, Kansas, or like Redwood City, California, with people of differing identities from me, and they're connecting with it. I'm so appreciative of that. One thing that stood out from one Q&A was a person talking about a scene, a vignette in the short of this young couple and this boy who's caught in between his mother and father. And it's a mirror of the relationship of Emmanuel and Senior in the car. And a person was like, oh, why does this little boy have a teddy bear? And they went on this rant, well, not a rant, but just like an exploration of like that bear symbolizes, his vulnerability and how masculinity is, stripped from boys at a young age, specifically Black boys. And I never saw that. I put that teddy bear in there because my producer has a children's book and she has a toy that goes along with it. I'm like, hey, cross promotion, but it worked, and it's so interesting to see to hear people's interpretations of the film and how they're taking ownership of it. So I welcome all of their perspectives on it, even the ones that I didn't put in.
I mean, you mentioned you had a long pre-production process. I'm curious, how you found your cast from the extras, if they're just your friends that you had walking in the background or to your lead cast.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to have a casting agency cast Cottage Grove. So my first year at DePaul, on the advice of a mentor in the program, he told me to map out my MFA and what do you want to accomplish. And I knew going in that I was an actor's director, so I needed access to the top talent in Chicago. So I interned at a casting agency, O'Connor Casting. I did pretty well. And then when it was time to make my thesis, I sent them the script and said, hey, would you mind casting this for me for free? They didn't do it for free, but they gave me a reduction. And so they were responsible for the principal cast, and I'm so grateful for that. As regards to the background talent, we put on backstage, and we didn't pay anyone, but it shows what I like to do for all my sets is make sure that everyone feels valued. So even the backstage, the background talent, we had auditions for them, and I wanted for them to hear my voice and connect with the intention of the film. And so for that opening sequence, we had about 20 people show up. We gave them food, and I put some crew members in there to really fill out that fantasy scene. But it's, I think it boils down to just asking for help, not being afraid to put yourself out there. Sometimes it works, sometimes you get a reduced fee, but uh, that's a bedrock for the way I produce my work.
Well, one of the things I liked about the film is it's very nuanced.
Mm.
There's a lot going on between the lines, I think,
Mm.
which is something that young filmmakers sometimes, don't do. They want to put everything on the page. And I thought you did a really good job holding things back so the audience can be figuring it out as they go along with this relationship. I'm curious, are those the types of stories you're drawn to? Very nuanced relationship type stories, or do you ever want to do big action movies or something totally sideways?
You know, perhaps I feel like going back to my love for storytelling and then theater and acting, there's always going to be um, a focus on how to make these stories human. And we're all layered, have a lot of subtext, have a lot of complexities to it. And that's what makes me curious with film. Like, I love big blockbusters and fantasies, but I find that stuff more regular than like slice of life films.
Right.
I'm like, I, Mark Twain's quote, "Truth is stranger than fiction," is really what I live by because the simple fact that people decide to live their lives with all these experiences, with all these complexities, that fascinates me as a filmmaker. So I think I will always lead with like human-less stories, but I think there's room for me to go into fantasy and action as long as I can ground characters in reality.
So what do you think is the biggest challenges that you're seeing today as a filmmaker as you kind of look to move your career forward off these shorts?
Yeah, I've been having a lot of conversations with Chicago filmmakers about this, but this may sound, well, not radical, but I think we have to go back to like late 90s, early 2000s independent filmmaking where people really rallied their community to move the needle on their career. Um, I think with the inundation of social media and AI in a great way. I'm not afraid of AI. I think it's an amazing tool. It is changing the landscape of film in terms of access. Now, film festivals, I believe, are becoming too detached from local markets, from audiences, because of the financial aspect, and also some of the like hubris or status that comes with it. Audiences are more connected to things that they can easily get. So like YouTube or TikTok or being invested in a creator. So I think as independent filmmakers, we have to lean into that. Yes, submit to film festivals, great, but I think nurturing an audience and finding ways for them to connect with their consumer, with their audience, in a way to build their career as opposed to just using laurels to support it. Um, that's where I think the opportunity is for filmmakers now.
Can you unpack that a little bit? I'm curious when you say connect with your audience, how
Hmm.
how are you trying to do that and how do you recommend other filmmakers doing that? I mean, it seems like an obvious thing, but there is a big landscape. Like you said, you got
Hmm.
YouTube, you got streamers, you got theaters, you got TikTok, you've
Yep.
got so how do you find that audience?
Well, before I went back into acting, I worked in marketing for Broadway in Chicago here, in Chicago, and our focus was always how do we bring new customers to pre-Broadway shows, and a lot of that is grassroots approach. And I think the independent film scene has left that. And that's what I mean by nurturing an audience, going back to the communities or community that connect with your work and feeding them or engaging them with your style of connections. So that could be in a mailing list, which I feel like people think is antiquated, but a lot of people engage with that, especially older demographics. Going back to community screenings, engaging with local press as opposed to higher up markets. I think those are the ways I'm trying to engage my audience because I believe this: the audiences are the ones that make or break a filmmaker's career.
Yeah.
Regardless if, and we've seen this last year in the trades of like Sundance or Tribeca, all these films premiering, but having a hard time distributing or find distribution. But if you can say with your data, like I have this amount of people following me, or I can guarantee 1,000 people butts in a seat at a theater, that allows you to make your own ticket. And so that's where my mindset is, not necessarily resting on, again, more mainstream ways of putting out your film or media. How can I focus on the people that connect with my film, engage them in a way for them to spread that awareness to their friend group or network, and collect that information?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I mean, that sounds similar to what kind of I experienced too as someone who went to film school. You're kind of taught how to make a good film, but you're not
Yeah,
taught to make a film people want to see necessarily.
sure.
And I mean, it's the common joke of like a film school person makes the experimental film no one understands, and then they get mad because no one understands it because they're trying to be too metaphorical or whatever. But you're right about making films people want to see. So I'm curious, maybe how you kind of stay in touch to however what you want to say, social media, what you think people want to see nowadays, if that makes any sense. So what ways you stay in touch with that?
Well, I want to reframe it a little bit, not necessarily what people want to see, but how do you explain your film to that audience? Oftentimes, again, I think, and I did this as well, I just put my film in the film festivals, like, they'll get it. Well, actually, you need to engage them in a way for them to understand that. Um, so for Cottage Grove, we premiered in 2023 at Tallgrass. And now we're in 2025 and we're still gaining momentum because I've been telling my team, let's win the region. And let's not focus on getting into, like, again, these upper level or sometimes mid-level festivals. How do we get the film to the audience that the themes connect to? So
Right,
with Cottage
right.
Grove, it deals with African American families, father and sons. It deals with questions of identity. It deals with some fantastical elements as well. So let's focus on those communities and markets and bring the film to them. So again, community screenings, contacting local press. Like, I think people really look down on, like, newspapers because I think we're so digital, but there's an audience is an audience.
Right.
There's people that still read the local newspaper, or a trade or a brochure. And my thing is, we have no shame with that. An audience member is an audience member. So again, finding the themes of our film and then figuring out tactics and processes to bring the film to them, because it's not enough to just put it on a streaming platform. There's so many films that are on Netflix or any small distribution. How do you get your audience to go see it?
Right. Right. Well,
Yeah.
before we wrap up, how can people follow you and your work?
Yeah. So yeah. So you can follow us on Cottage Grove Productions. That's for all of our socials. We're also building out a website right now. We have, like, this mailing list with, like, a couple hundred folks on it. So if you want to be a part of it, just, like, send us a DM, or we have the link of our mailing tree and our mailing list in our bio. Um, yeah, we're out in the community too. Like in Chicago, I'm really focused on making sure my audience know this film and can see it. And that's the biggest thing for me. Like, I wish I had someone growing up who was a director or screenwriter living in my neighborhood. And that's why I'm staying here in Chicago and wanting my work to be seen by them. So that's what we're doing. And upcoming, we got another short, but it's really a feature that we're working on. I think it's time for me to take the leap to make a feature, which I'm very scared about, but I think I should. So we plan to shoot it October of this year. We have 30% of the budget. Now we're going to investors to get 70%. And yeah, the feature is wild. It's very wild.
Well, keep us posted on that. And in the
Yeah,
meantime, stay in touch and yeah, break a leg on the all the future things you're working on.
I appreciate it. Thank you both for having me. Thank
All
you.
right, you take
Thank
care, and
you.
you and Andrew need to, since you're both up there, you need to connect.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew just finished his first feature, so you can swap stories on getting yours done.
Yeah, I want to just pick your brain, Andrew, about your
No,
feature.
anytime, anytime. We did
Yeah,
on
I
like
love that.
the indie, Illinois budget. So,
Mm,
anything to get it done.
okay. Yeah,
All
let's
right,
talk,
George.
man.
You take care, buddy.
All right. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
All right,
much.
bye-bye.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, owned and operated by Stephanie Moore and Stephanie Harrison. We at Gemini Crown Tech have covered all your production management needs with our proprietary software. Please visit our website at www.geminicrowntech.com and use the code FMP for Filmmaker Mixer podcast listeners, so we know how you heard about us.
Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, a podcast created and hosted by filmmakers Jeff Stolen and Andrew Lamping, and produced by Melody Lopez.
Our theme song was composed by Stephen D. Bennett.
Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and stay tuned for future episodes.